Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Tuesday, August 20th, and we're here to speak out against the Blue Jays today. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined by Jori Negin-Shecter.
I'm sorry, what are we doing?
Just like many former Blue Jays, current Blue Jays have done this week, there has been no lack of news regarding comments about the Blue Jays organization, so we're here to add on to the pile. Jori, how are you doing today?
Well, I was doing well, but apparently we're going anti-Blue Jays today. Apparently this is news to me.
Yes, for those who missed it, there has been, I guess I don't know if I want to call it a firestorm, because I mean the comments ultimately are not all that bad. I think the Bassitt ones are a little bit more significant, but Chris Bassitt went on the Chris Rose Rotation podcast and discussed a variety of topics, and we'll get into that. Matt Chapman had a quote about the Blue Jays, and Bo Bichette is reportedly not planning on staying in Toronto in 2025. So we're going to get into all three of those today.
So many things. Everything is happening.
But before we get into those, there is some positivity on the field that I guess we can start with, and that is Bowden Francis being named the pitcher of the week in the American League for his efforts against the Chicago Cubs and Los Angeles Angels. Two very good starts. He struck out 15 over 14 innings, gave up 1 earned run, 4 hits, no walks. This is the best Bowden Francis has looked in his career.
Yeah, this is exciting. This is a guy that is suddenly making a case to be a rotation piece for the Blue Jays once again, because if you'll recall, back in May and June, the Bowden Francis story looked like it had reached its conclusion. But by all accounts, the splitter for him has turned into a real weapon. And all of this, and Bowden Francis is part of the Blue Jays 2025 rotation plans, which is bordering on unthinkable based on how things started to begin the year. I think of his start in Houston back in, was it April or might have been May, and he gets just absolutely shelled, and it didn't get much better from there. And he had these blips of, positivity, but basically looked like a long man. And the last 2 starts against not great, teams, mind you, but still 2 exceptional starts. The thing to me is the 15 Ks and the 0 walks. That is really exciting to me. And it speaks to the fact that maybe Bowden Francis is a starter after all.
Yeah, it's a huge development for the Blue Jays if he can kind of maintain this through the end of the year and carry it into spring training, because he could be that number 5 starter. And I mean, I don't know how confident you are running back this exact rotation that they have right now. I still think that that's probably a place where you would like to add an extra arm who can capably fill one of those spots. And you need to see Bowden Francis continue this stretch, despite, it has been 5 good starts in a row now where he did, or I guess it's four good starts in a row, because he did the 2 good starts against Baltimore and then these 2 very, very, very good starts against the Angels and the Cubs. It's crazy to look like. I mean, he's just ditched the curveball. The splitters look really good. He's throwing the 4-seamer at the top of the zone. He's kind of looking like Kevin Gausman-y, which is pretty crazy to think that, Kevin Gausman isn't looking Kevin Gausman-y these days, and Bowden Francis is. So, yeah, really, really exciting, I think, to see him step up this way, win pitcher of the week, like a really cool thing for him, I'm sure, being at this point in his career as kind of like an older guy who's never really been on the national radar like that before. I think cool award for him, and hopefully he's able to kind of keep it going, and it's going to be interesting to see if he kind of keeps going like fastball splitter, or if he does eventually try and work back in that curveball or the slider or kind of anything like that.
Yeah, a game of adjustments, right? And we'll see what exactly he chooses to do. The third time a Blue Jays player has won the award. It was Vladdy that's won it twice. But for the Blue Jays, what this ultimately does, and as you kind of alluded to, I think that for Francis, not only does it put him in position to be part of the Blue Jays rotation next year, it maybe changes the kind of crux of the rotation as well. If he can be, instead of a swingman 5, maybe a bit of a 4, or maybe even a fake 3, so to speak. And then what you're looking at, maybe instead of looking for a top of the rotation arm, even a guy that you're thinking can be, better than Gausman. Maybe you're taking a wild swing at Corbin Burns or something ridiculous like that. Maybe you're moving down a couple pegs and maybe you're shopping in the kind of middle of the rotation so that you're not quite so concerned about having to find all this incredible value right at the tip top of the rotation.
The Yusei Kikuchi range.
I mean, would make some sense for a reunion, but we've discussed that already. But like it's gonna
Yeah.
be somewhere in that ballpark, I think now, especially if Francis can maintain this. Now it's been what, 2 good starts and then 4 positive ones. He still is going to have to continue to put together basically another good month and change. But if he can, then to me, there's no reason to think he isn't penciled into the rotation to start next season.
Yeah, I mean, just looking, his next start is against the Angels, so feel like he should be able to continue his string of success. I mean, the Angels, man, they looked so bad in that sweep, but we've kind of already talked about that. It's interesting because kind of the whispers are out there a little bit now. We talked about it last episode about like Gausman specifically, but like kind of shortening the workload for these veteran guys to try and get them ready for 2025. And the whispers have kind of been out there that there might be like the 6-man rotation, or they're gonna try and at least limit these guys what they're doing in game. So that's Gausman, Barrios, Bassitt, and then Yariel. They want to get him as many innings as possible. But Bowden, if he can pitch the way that he has the last couple times, could be really, really big for this team down the stretch in terms of saving innings off the bullpen, and even just for his own development, being able to continue to work through things and having success. I feel like is the most valuable thing for him at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I look at last night, Gosman's comments. I don't recall them exactly, but post game, he essentially said exactly that. He said that it was going to be about kind of managing his workload and saving his bullets, so to speak, and
Yeah.
and just recovery and everything of that nature, right? Like Kevin Gausman has not been Kevin Gausman, and he's down on velo. The strikeouts are basically at the lowest they've been since I think it was like 2018 or 2019. This is not the same Kevin Gausman that we've seen, at least specifically this month. I mean, he's striking out, I think it was 5.5 ish guys per nine. Like the K's have totally dried up. And it's just not the same Kevin Gausman. And to me, it would speak to him continuing to battle what was ailing him earlier in the season during spring training. So we'll presumably get a better idea in the weeks to come exactly how the Blue Jays plan to deploy their rotation. But the fact that Gausman only went 5 innings yesterday against the Reds probably gives us a bit of insight and a bit of a sneak preview of what the Blue Jays could be aiming to do with guys like him, and of course with Bassitt and Barrios as well.
Yeah, I think you probably want to get them to like the 160 inning range so that it's not unreasonable to get them to 180, 190 next year. I think that's probably a fair target. But before we move on, I want you to grade how confident you would be in a Kevin Gausman, Jose Barrios, Yariel Rodriguez, Chris Bassitt, and Bowden Francis rotation opening 2025 for the Blue Jays.
That's a tough question to answer because you would figure with Rodriguez specifically, there's untapped potential in him, and you would figure there will be continued growth from him. So you're kind of betting on him being an important part of next year's rotation. So the question then becomes, is there room to add a mid-rotation arm if Bowden Francis is part of your rotation plans? That rotation to me is a C, maybe a C plus. It's not good enough. But the problem is the most obvious areas for improvement, in my estimation, are the 2 guys that are the inning munching guys that you're going to have trouble moving off of or you've committed to long term in Jose Barrios and Chris Bassitt.
Yeah, there's been, I would say, some warning signs, some red flags, and I mean they both pitched really well at different points of this season. And I think there was a tweet early in the season that I had about Jose Barrios being in Cy Young contention. And I mean, obviously we knew the regression was coming. We knew the regression monster was behind him with kind of the where he's striking out like 6 hitters per 9 or whatever. But it's it's definitely a rotation that you're going to want to add, like a pitcher that you're more confident in if you do intend on competing in 2025.
Yeah, and the thing is too, don't forget they committed a healthy sum of money to Yariel Rodriguez. So the expectation, and obviously the open market changes the pay structure a little bit, so to speak, but they're paying him like a mid-rotation arm. The expectation is for him to continue to grow and continue to be a mid-rotation arm for the Blue Jays. Is he going to be that? I guess we'll see. They still really got to stretch him out quite a bit if they want him to be that.
I mean, out of
But
those five guys, he has the lowest ERA right now.
well, that's my thought, is that he is, of that group, the best pitcher right now.
Yeah. Yeah, he's intriguing. I think he's looked good enough, and like he's another one of those guys where you let him go the rest of this season, and hopefully he instills enough confidence in you to kind of be penciled into the rotation next year and not just kind of a question mark there. I think if he pitches the way that he has, like it's probably good enough for you to look at him in 2025 and say, yeah, this is the guy that we can rely on getting 150 innings from next year as a starter or something like
Yeah, and
that.
I think they'd be comfortable with that, and they'd probably be happy with that, right? If you
Yeah.
can get them to that mark for next season, and if you can set them up for that this year, that would probably be,
Yeah.
in my estimation at this point, a successful season for Yariel Rodriguez.
Yeah, yeah, like I mean his pro debut it's been interesting. I mean, there's been a lot of injuries. Obviously, he's kind of had some ups and some downs, but I would say he's had more ups than downs anyways. So yeah, really interesting. I mean, just the way that's all unfolded. But let's move on to these comments because I feel like that is the news of the day, of the week, of the last little while, where these three guys all kind of in various different forms have um these comments that make you kind of question what's going on behind the scenes a little bit. And let's start with Chapman because I think his are the least significant, I would say. So he was speaking to the Mercury News in San Francisco about trying to, or whether he's going to stay in San Francisco or what he wants to do after this season. And he said, I don't think I was as comfortable maybe in Toronto the last couple of years as I am here with San Francisco. Sometimes your environment has a lot to do with that, and it's just a good environment for me. I definitely enjoy playing on the West Coast and playing for Bob Melvin. I'm comfortable here. So obviously there, Matt Chapman playing with the manager that he played with for a long time in Oakland. He's a California guy, so he's back close to home, and he's been having a really nice season for the Giants. I think he's like a top 20 player by FWAR and a top 10 player by Baseball Reference WAR this season. So he's been really, really good. And I think it just kind of makes sense that the dude who's playing close to home is more comfortable playing in San Francisco than he was playing in a different country.
Now, that makes sense, but I also wonder how much of that is related to what we heard from Chris Bassitt, and there was some walking back after the fact, but the unfixable problems, I don't know if you have the quote in front of you, but I wonder if there is any relation to that comfort from Matt Chapman that he said was kind of lacking in Toronto compared to what Bassitt ultimately told Chris Rose on his podcast yesterday, because the quote unquote unfixable problems, that to me is it speaks to a similar concern, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you missed it, the quote was, "I think we do a lot of things right here in Toronto, but I don't want to identify the problems because some of the problems I don't think are fixable." And of course, yes, like Jory mentioned, he did run it back during yesterday's or before yesterday's game to Sportsnet's Shai Davidi and Arden Zwelling, saying that the unfixable problems are situational, not structural. Things like age and like lack of market or whatever, and like that's very, you can look at the way that he said we have problems that aren't fixable, and I don't think that he was talking about his birthday being a long time ago.
I find that a little bit difficult to believe. I think that he got some very friendly advice from a couple of PR representatives that said, we think you should probably say something else.
Yeah, I mean the Bassett stuff is was, it's great. Like, I mean, it's funny because every time we always want players to be honest and speak their minds a little bit more, but then they say stuff like this, and then they're like, oh, well, how can you say this? Whatever. I mean, yeah, it's tough because like that's probably, I know Chris Rose was on the fan pregame yesterday, and he was like, "Who's upset with Bassitt about that?" And I think that was a fair question because it seemed like on Twitter, like everybody was like, "Hey, like great for him for speaking out. Like it's great to see dudes speak their mind." But you have to think that behind the scenes, that ruffles some feathers.
Yeah, that's probably who was not happy about it. It would be the Ross Atkins and the Mark Shapiros of the world that did not like their, substantial multi-million dollar investment telling them that they're not doing a good job.
Yeah. He I mean, like there's a ton of stuff that we can kind of dig into with what he said to Chris Rose, but I think the unfixable problems is kind of the headliner of that. And like the Ohtani pivot thing, again, he said that the Blue Jays didn't have a pivot after Shohei Ohtani. And while yes, that's true, there wasn't to be fair, there wasn't exactly a ton of options, like unless they were going to go out and sign Blake Snell or Matt Chapman, which I don't really think were realistic options in the way that the offseason played out.
Yeah, or even, Cody Bellinger, who it
Yeah.
turns out is not the same Cody Bellinger that he was last season. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Chris Bassitt is wrong in saying that they didn't really have a pivot in both capacities, right? They didn't have a pivot because maybe there was a lack of foresight, lack of planning, but Shohei Ohtani is a unicorn of unicorns. I mean, I think to the broadcast yesterday, talking about Ellie De La Cruz and mentioning 3 or 4 unicorns in baseball, and maybe De La Cruz is one of them. Shohei Ohtani is definitely one of them. I don't know who the third or fourth ones are, but there's no replicating what Shohei Ohtani does on and off the field. And because the Blue Jays ultimately did not get Shohei Ohtani, this vacuum that it left for them, this $700 million vacuum, like, how are you going to fill that? There is no filling that.
Yeah, I don't think there's one free agent that they could have signed outside of Shohei Ohtani that would have affected or changed the way that this season ended up playing out.
Yeah. And I also think, listen, is Shohei Ohtani going to single-handedly fix this Blue Jays team
Maybe.
that has dramatic, well,
maybe. There's a chance. There's a chance.
There's a chance. He is probably going to be NL MVP or close to it. What I'll say is I don't think Shohei Ohtani individually could have fixed the disaster that this team has ultimately unfolded to become. I would imagine they would be more competitive in the wild card race. I don't think that much is astonishing. And you would probably figure that you would probably be looking at a little bit more of a Angels-esque urgency during the Ohtani window kind of season. Maybe Ricky Tiedemann isn't a Blue Jay. Maybe Juan Soto is a Blue Jay. A lot of stuff probably changes in terms of the complexion of this team if Ohtani does get signed. So the looming shadow of that still remains. And that's kind of what I think Bassitt was alluding to, is that the aftermath, the aftershocks of not getting him, Justin Turner was effective as a Blue Jay, had his moments, not Ohtani. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, extremely effective as a Blue Jay, not Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, I think Bassitt kind of when he did his clarifying of his comments on the podcast, and he said, there wasn't like a number one and a number two and a number three. It wasn't that. We went after the biggest guy and unfortunately didn't get him. There wasn't another option. That's just the reality. We tried to do the best we can. We got Justin Turner. Justin Turner's no slouch. He did unbelievable things. IKF was somewhere we called the working because he was an unbelievable player. So we got great players. It was just that Ohtani was the best of the best. So I'm curious what you think of this kind of follow up to that, where he said you can't say the front office didn't have a goal to be the best possible team because they went after the best possible player. Saying that doesn't even make sense, but we want to be the best team. We want to win a World Series. And I think the front office obviously shares those exact same goals.
Yeah, I don't think anything he said there is egregious.
Yeah.
It sounds right to me.
It's funny because like the way that the season's gone and obviously the flack that the front office has caught, like, I'm sure some people aren't happy reading that the front office wants to be the best team possible. Like shocking that, the front office like is actually trying to make this team good. And I bet you if you look at free agent war, the list probably goes like Shohei, Matt Chapman, like maybe somebody else, and then IKF. Like I bet you IKF is in the top
A
five
hundred percent, a
of free
hundred
agent
percent.
war,
And they
right?
would have had him for another year if they chose not to deal him at the peak of his value, realistically. So to
Yeah.
me, I don't really see any issue with their decision making. It's just that they put all their eggs in the Otani basket and they didn't get anything.
Yeah. I think it would have been nice to see them take a bigger swing than a Justin Turner. Like
Oh,
if
for
they
sure.
had taken a shot with Soler, and I think that's like obviously Soler's season hasn't been great, but I think like seeing them take that shot would have been more encouraging than kind of ending up with Justin Turner out of that group of designated hitters that were available.
100%, 100%.
I mean Bassitt, like I mean, there's so much stuff that Bassitt said, but he also talked about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and how he thinks that Vladdy is gonna be in Toronto for a long time. Obviously, he wants to be there for a long time. Um, it's he said he doesn't think that there's a rush to get an extension done, but I think that there is a deadline on the extension right now, and that is opening day 2025.
I would say that's fair. I would say that's probably fair. I think that also, you know, Vlad is generally speaking alluded to wanting to remain a Blue Jay. So, you know, does Bassitt saying it maybe reassure some fans? I would think so. You know, by all accounts, this is a bridge that these two sides should be able to get over. I just don't know what that number is going to be. I mean, I think on the broadcast yesterday, Arden Zwelling mentioned Rafael Devers as a comp. I mean, listen, there are opportunities, there are obvious parallels that you're going to be able to find with various players around baseball. And you should be able to reach an extension with Vladdy. It's really just a matter of getting it done. And to me, it has to be priority number one.
Yeah, and Bassett saying like that he doesn't think it's a negative that he doesn't have extension. Like, I mean, I generally agree. I think this offseason will be the time to get it done, and like you're gonna be paying probably a lot more than if you had tried to get it done last offseason. But yeah, obviously, hey, franchise piece. We've talked about it a ton. Lock him up. It doesn't preclude any windows, anything like that. Like it's a move that helps you stay relevant even if your team is bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think Vlad was going to extend with you last season unless you gave him something ridiculous at the time, which,
Yeah.
might not have been ridiculous today because he's in the middle of arguably the best stretch of his career. Maybe not even arguably.
Yeah. What did you think of Bassett saying that Vladdy should move to third base?
I actually don't think I caught that, but
Yeah,
needless to say, I don't know if Vlad is the defensive coordinator, or excuse me, I don't know if Bassett is the defensive coordinator for this team. And I think we're maybe understanding why that might be.
here's the quote. The craziest part to me is that if I was Vladdy and I was going to free agency, I'd be like, listen, you're moving me to third base because I'm going to make a lot more money at third base than first base. And the reality is that he's pretty damn good at third base. I thought moving Vladdy to first to third was going to be an absolute crap show. There's no way Vladdy can play third when we moved him, or there's no way Vladdy can play third. Then we moved him over to third, and I'm like, damn, you can actually play third. Like, you played third, obviously, in the past, but I thought that was a long time ago. He's pretty damn good at third. I would throw him over there 75% of the time. I wouldn't even put him at first base.
Wow. I mean, listen, I'm not sure I agree with that assessment, but I don't agree. I don't disagree that he didn't look at a place. He made a couple plays there where he looked really athletic. Like he's not really a third baseman,
Vladdy at
but
third base this year, -1 DRS in 53 innings, -1 OAA in 53 innings.
yeah, like
So it's like, it hasn't been disastrous,
yeah,
but it hasn't been pretty damn good.
yeah, I would say that's pretty. I think that maybe expectations were on the floor,
Yeah.
and Fly didn't exactly leap over those, but maybe he tiptoed over them.
Yeah, he's been fine. I just don't think he's a full-time third baseman. Okay. Last thing before we go, Bo Bichette, reported by USA Today's Bob Nightingale, says the Toronto Blue Jays are expected to entertain trade offers this winter for shortstop Bo Bichette, who has no plans to stay in Toronto once he's a free agent after the 2025 season.
Man, that's tough. Like, I feel like it kind of was all leading up to this. I think back to him refusing to renew his contract with the Blue Jays. Things have always seemed adversarial. And even when he signed that 3-year deal, the talk was, oh, maybe this is a sign of good things to come. But I mean, maybe it was just to get the two sides to stop fighting for a couple of years. Like, this is a guy that is very clearly trying to maximize what he can get in some respects.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like the Blue Jays are going to pay him what he's going to ultimately be asking for. Now, I have been pretty vocal in saying that we might be watching the Chris Bryanttification of Bo Bichette. So would I want to give him $200 million? I'm not entirely sure I would, but that's going to be another vacuum that the Blue Jays are going to have to fill.
I think I'm more pro Bo than you are. I think that's fair to say. And I just like, I mean, it sucks to like trade franchise players like this. And I get like if he isn't going to be there after 2025 that you want to trade him this offseason. But I just think like how can you trade him right now? Like he's coming off this two calf injuries. He's, probably been dealing with these lower body injuries for over a calendar year at this point. And like he hit 4 home runs this year in 80 games and hit 222. Like what are you going to get back for him when he's one, reportedly disgruntled, two playing poorly, and three hurt? Like
Yeah,
what are you going to get back
you're
for?
not getting anything for him. I do wonder if it could be in the cards that they basically go to him, they go, you know, you get in great shape and you spend an off season going sicko mode, and you come back and we'll either trade you in May if you have a hot April, or we'll trade you in July if you play well, or if we're in the hunt, you will be a deadline, rental for us, so to speak, and maybe we can try to salvage this relationship. But trading him this offseason makes almost zero sense unless you're turning him into something almost unthinkable.
Yeah, and like what are the odds that they trade him this offseason and then he comes back next year healthy and has a really great year and puts up like a 5-6 win season and kind of looks like the guy he's always been, and just, like, I mean, I just think that it's
Greater than
it's
50%. Greater than 50%.
yeah, like I think that it's just the worst possible time to trade him. And especially if you're trying to contend in 2025, right? Like if you're not going to be getting like a star level player back, like you need star Bo Bichette or a star in return for Bo Bichette if you are planning on contending in 2025.
You're basically only trading him to the Dodgers for one of their T100 guys
Like
or
yeah, like
one
if
of
you're
their
trading
fringe
are you
T100s.
trading him for Dalton Rushing?
Maybe. I mean, that might be something I'd do. I think you're making a big bet on Dalton Rushing being productive next season. And also Dalton Rushing, by all accounts, a catcher, but fringy, maybe more of a first baseman, which you're trying to extend Vladimir Guerrero Jr. right now. So what's the plan? Like, I'm not sure unless you can really get a dynamic starting pitcher, unless you can, go out and get someone that really impacts your team for the next 3 to 4 years and does so at a position that you need guys, then why would you deal him at the
Yeah.
very, very low point of his value?
Yeah, it's such a weird topic because it's like not one that I thought that we were gonna get to. I know like
I
obviously
also,
all the
because
stuff in the lead up, but like
last winter, the discussion was like
yeah,
him
that's
for
true.
Christopher Morel. And at the time, we were like, this makes zero sense. So why would the Blue Jays do it now when it makes even less sense?
And then I mean just like considering like the conversation then is like Bo Bichette for Christopher Morel, and then Christopher Morel gets traded for Isak Paredes, who is a 25-year-old all-star third baseman, right? So you kind of look at the value there, and it's like, well, Bo Bichette, kind of all-star shortstop who had a slow finish, whatever. So now he gets traded for a younger all-star third baseman with more team control. So you look like Bo Bichette might not even be worth like a Christopher Morel level player right now.
I don't know. I think you're in a tough spot if you're the Blue
Yeah.
Jays, and you're gonna have to navigate this very carefully. I mean, listen, inaction is oftentimes not looked upon favorably. You know, people don't like when a GM is
Are
maybe
you saying that you
paralyzed by,
value stability and continuity?
well, I don't not value it.
Okay, before we go, last thought here. How much do these three situations put together concern you about anything behind the scenes?
All right, on a 0 to 10 scale, I think before this, maybe I would have been at a 4 based on I'm sure that everyone is frustrated and no one likes losing. So I'm sure that is what expedited the process. But all three of this coming down in the span of realistically, 48 hours less, maybe even. That to me is of substantial concern. I wouldn't put in anything in, a 9 or 10, but I've maybe gone from a 4 to maybe a 7 or an 8.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm probably not super concerned because like the Chapman thing, like he obviously wasn't here this season. And, I think that his comments are just more a product of him being home versus anything being wrong in Toronto. Bassitt's stuff, like I think there's some truth there. And that's where, like comments like that maybe prompt some conversations about what needs to be fixed. So I think that can be positive. And then the Bo Bichette thing, I think that's the most concerning thing to me, like disheartening almost, as to it seems like they're down a road with him that there's almost no coming back from.
Yeah, I'll add one last thing that I think of is I recall early in the season, maybe even back in the spring training, we heard a lot about Bo Bichette taking on a bigger leadership role for this team. And you just wonder if his voice being amplified didn't necessarily have the best results.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff we'll never know. So gonna be an entertaining offseason, I think. At least I'm sure there's gonna be some movement for sure. So with that, we are going to run. Thank you very much for tuning into the Bird's Eye View podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe and like button. We're there at the Bird's Eye View pod. You can follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter. The pod is at BEV_pod. Make sure you drop a follow or review if you are listening on any audio medium. And thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you later this week.